Welcome to a new season of the Daily Direct. In this teaser for the upcoming Daily Direct podcast featuring an interview with renowned ransomware negotiator Kurtis Minder, we veer away from topics of print publishing toward the internet world of prints publishing, as Kurtis recounts how an otherwise unassuming Midwest teen became a crucial player in helping the artist formerly known as Prince get his music into the hands of eager fans without the aid of a record label.
So when I was just getting into tech when I was a kid, and when I say I was a kid, I did something really weird when I was in high school where I negotiated with the school, which is ironic that later I'd become one of the world's most famous negotiators. But where I got a job at a tech company in the early 90s, building. It was an internet company, internet access company, which is kind of early internet, right? This is when you had to dial into the modems and made all the noise and stuff like that. So there was one of those in in a town near where I grew up in central Illinois that was being built, and I lucked out and got a job there. And I was able to get a deal with my school where, at least for part of my junior year and almost my entire senior year, where I worked at that internet company from 2 to 10 p.m. every day.
Wow.
And so I had a 40-hour work week working at an internet company in the early 90s, and I was going to high school at the same time, and it was a whole thing. Well, so after I graduated, I actually ended up working at 3 more internet companies, 2 of which I helped start from the ground up. And one of those, it was a very small operation, and so now to the personal part. So I'm working at this internet company, and I'm just out of high school. I'm pretty young, like, right at 18 or so. And my best friend from when I was in kindergarten, his brother was a DJ around town. And then he moved to DC and got into the DJ scene in Washington, DC. He was going to Howard University to become an architect. And by the way, that guy now is the head of architecture for the U.S. embassies at the State Department.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he's still my close friend, but he was a DJ and he was into all this underground stuff. And he used to send us the cassette tapes of all the underground reggae and stuff like that we were into. But we were all really big Prince fans for various reasons. That's a longer story, but all very big Prince fans. And he said, I heard a rumor. He calls me and my best friend up. We're still in the middle of nowhere, Illinois, where we grew up. And he said, I heard a rumor that if you go to Chanhassen, Minnesota on this date at this time, Prince is just going to let you into Paisley Park Studios. And that was like a 12-hour drive, but we're like, let's do that.
Oh, you have to do that.
Yeah, let's do that, see what happens. So we go, and sure enough, they let us in. And, we waited for hours and hours and hours, and then they let us in. And it was really kind of benign. Like, Prince did show up, but for most of the time we were there, we were in this sort of, I can't explain the room yet. I'll tell you, it does have relevance to your comment about Charlie Murphy in a second.
Okay.
I can't really explain the room. It was a very strange setup, but it was a big room, and they had tables set up, and we were just kind of having cocktails and listening to Prince music over the PA system or whatever. And then we're there, I don't know, an hour or two. It's early in the morning time frame, right? And Prince just walks in the same door I walked in with a guitar slung around his shoulder. And there's a little amp in the corner, and he just plugs into the amp and then says, hey, and he gets on a little mic and he says, hey, I'm going to jam out for you guys. And he plays for a little bit and he leaves. And we're like, what the hell is happening? This is the weirdest thing ever. And so we, as we're leaving, we get pulled aside by one of his security guards, who I later learned his name was Aaron. And Aaron said, hey, can I get your contact information? And we're like, I have no idea why he's asking me for this, but let's see what happens. So I give it to him. And a couple weeks later, we get a call from Paisley Park Studios, and they're like, hey, we're having another get together, come back. So I'll just zoom through a lot of the story. This happens a lot over the course of a few months. And we end up like, it's anything from these little gatherings to, he does like he's filming for videos, and he has this do like a mock audience where he like makes us look like we're a bigger group of people than we are. And by the way, the group of people dwindled down from like when we first went, it was probably 40. And then when they started doing like these little events, it would be like 15 or 20. So about half that they sort of selected for some reason. I still don't know why they picked us. And it was right about that time that Prince had this big this big debate with his record company. And he was writing the word, I don't know if you remember, he changed his name to the unpronounceable symbol.
Yes.
He wrote the word slave on his face. And he was talking about how, sort of abused the artists were by the record companies. And he mentions this in one of the events, and he talks about how he's like, look, I am a unique musician in that I write all of my own stuff. I play all of the instruments on the album. I do all the vocals on the album. I own my own recording studio, so I record, mix, and master my own work. He's like, so I don't need, the record company for any of that.
Yeah.
What I need them for, distribution. He's like, I can't get my record. This is when we had physical records,
right.
Or at the time CDs. I can't get my CD into Best Buy or into Tower Records or whatever. They have all of those agreements. And I just was like, oh, idea. We could sell his stuff on the internet. I work for an internet company. So I pitched them, and long story short, we end up building one of the first e-commerce systems to sell records on the internet for Prince out of this little internet company in Illinois.
You've got to be
and it was the whole, there's a lot to this story, but and we ended up, getting a lot of cool perks for that. And I've still got this, probably we shouldn't put on the air. I still have like maybe 100 bootleg Prince tapes from the studios.
Oh, get out.
And I have a bunch of stuff that nobody's ever heard in my house. I don't have a tape player to play those, but
my son does.
Well, we'll just have a tape party sometime, and we'll listen to Prince songs that nobody's heard before.
We will absolutely do that. No, my son is into everything old, so everything old becomes new again, and he actually will listen to cassette tapes. I have actually had to go in and take a pencil and
redo the tape.
Redo the tape.
You're like, I know how to fix this. This is like an old one. I got this. Yeah.
I got it. Yeah, the tape thing doesn't make any sense. Vinyl, you can make. You can make an argument for, absolutely, right. But the tapes, no.
Yeah, that they don't last forever. So that, like, those tapes are going to die someday, and I should somehow figure out how to get them into a digital format. But
yeah, you should be able. I don't think that should be too hard, actually.
Yeah, but I'm lazy. But I'll figure it out.
You need to do that. You need to do that in a very big way. Well, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. And if you ever want to geek out over some of those tapes, I'll bring them in here and we'll figure out how to play them or something.
That is awesome. That's incredible. Yeah. I'm quite jealous.
Yeah.
Quite jealous.
Yeah. And I was a kid, and I just remember my parents are super conservative, sort of Christian. We had a youth group that my parents started a church. We had a youth group in my house. But they knew I was this big Prince fan, and they knew I was doing this stuff. And at one point, I was still living at the house, in my parents' house. And I just remember this very specific moment that is stuck in my brain forever, where my mom, I had just gotten home from this long drive overnight, basically coming back. And my mom was going to work, and I was sitting on the steps to our porch, and she had to walk down the steps to go to the garage. It wasn't attached to the house. And I was sitting on the bottom, and I was shaking the glitter out of my shoes. And I remember the look on her face. She's like, "Did you have fun?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, it was awesome." And like, I'm shaking the glitter out of my shoes. It's so funny.
That is very funny. Is that the Charlie Murphy sort of part of the story?
I left that out.
Yeah, no, I gotta hear that.
So you're gonna think I'm making this up, but that room where we had every single one of those gatherings was the room that, if you watch the True Hollywood Stories, or Charlie Murphy True Hollywood Stories, where he talks about playing basketball. Yes. That was a basketball court. That was the basketball court. And here's the next thing that's crazy is I met Dave Chappelle in that room.
You're kidding.
Nope. Because one time Prince had Dave Chappelle, this is before he was famous, come do stand-up for us, for the little group, for the 20 people. He had the guy Dave Chappelle come do stand-up because he was friends with Dave Chappelle. But he actually... Dave was in the middle of a joke, and Prince just walked out and said, "Get off," basically kicked him off stage. So I was standing, and the stage is like this tiny little, it wasn't like a big stadium stage, it's a tiny little stage. So Dave just steps down next to me, and I'm like, "Sorry, man." He's like, "It's Prince. He can do whatever he wants." And so then he played, but I stood on the basketball court with Dave Chappelle that's in that story, and it's crazy. Yeah.
That is.
Yeah. That is, when I saw that episode, I was like, 100% that's real.
Yeah. Well, apparently Prince was not happy about that. He was miffed about
the story.
Yes, he was.
Yeah.
That they were sort of, making fun of him. There were no pancakes involved. Weren't there pancakes or something?
Well, the idea that Prince likes like breakfast food as his primary, that's true. Like that's absolutely true. And I got to know all of his band and everything. I knew all of his, little secrets. Yeah.
That is crazy. I remember shortly after Prince died, rest in peace, there were a lot of people coming out in Minnesota, like with stories that, he was Jehovah's Witness. And so sometimes he would go out and canvass.
Yep.
And they would hear their doorbell ring and they'd open the door and there's Prince standing there.
Yeah, that's true. and he became a Jehovah's Witness because of Larry Graham. Do you know who Larry Graham is?
I don't.
So Larry Graham, do you know who Larry Graham is? Oh, man. So Larry Graham, so you know Sly and the Family Stone? Right. So Larry Graham was the lead singer and bassist for Sly and the Family Stone. So it's not commonly known that Sly did not sing very many songs. He was too high. So Larry Graham played the bass and sang for Sly and the Family Stone. And then after Sly and the Family Stone, Larry Graham started a group called Graham Central Station.
Oh yeah,
which was Prince's favorite group when he was growing up. And so there was a point in the early 2000s where, Prince's sort of idols, musical idols, were James Brown, Sly and the Family Stone, the Staples Singers, right, and Graham Central Station. And there was a time into early 2000s, right after the turn of the century, his band was made up of his saxophonist was Maceo Parker from James Brown. His bassist was Larry Graham from Graham Central Station. He had the Staples Singers were his backup singers. He literally had all of the idols from when he was a kid in his band. It was an amazing time. But Larry Graham was a devout Jehovah's Witness, and he's the one that's converted Prince kind of in the early 2000s. Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
All right, I got the Prince story. Yeah, I got it down.
I told Gretchen before that you have to hear this story.
Yeah, it's weird.
Not only is this dude interesting from a cybersecurity standpoint, but that is one of the most incredible stories I've ever heard.
From a technical perspective, what people don't understand is in 1990, I think it was like 1995 or something like that. In 1995, there was no Stripe. There was no online payment platforms. So in order for us to build this, we actually had to write code. We had actual point of sale machines that would dial the credit card companies to get validation tokens and then move them across the network to the web servers so that we could it was very manual. And every single record that was ordered, the Paisley Park Studios required us to print out a receipt, a paper receipt. And so there's like a Okidata printer just going forever. And we're just stacking boxes and boxes of these receipts. Yeah, it's crazy.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Why can't I be good at something that would get me into these circles?
It was just luck. It was a lot of luck.
All right. Join us later this week for the full-length interview with Kurtis as we delve into the dark world of cyber ransom and the expanding threat of global internet crime syndicates. The Daily Direct podcast can be found at gjsentinel.com/podcasts or by searching Crossing the Divide on your favorite podcast app.